What's up, everyone? We're at it again today here on the Film Room, this time taking a look at perhaps one of the hardest defensive players to project in this entire draft class, Michigan State defensive end Malik McDowell. Now, this video might end up being a little bit longer than a lot of the other scouting reports I do this year, so the short version is this. He has the potential to be the most impactful defensive rookie in the NFL by a huge margin next season. More than Myles Garrett, more than Jonathan Allen, more than Reuben Foster, all of them. McDowell could very easily become one of the premier defensive linemen in the league, regardless of position, from day one. That is how talented he is. But there's a catch. He might need to be in the right locker room and with the right coaching staff in order to even sniff that potential, because I have some concerns with both his technique and his motor. Now, here's the longer version of all that, and I'll start with the part about his incredible physical gifts. There is no other player in this class that has McDowell's combination of size, length, strength, quickness, and fluidity. As far as athleticism is concerned, he's way up there with some of the other freaks to enter the league in recent years. Myles Garrett's obviously the poster child for rare physical specimens in this draft class, but McDowell seriously might be even more gifted when you look at the entire package that he puts on the field. For starters, he's got an anchor that you just would not believe for a sub 300 pounder who also happens to be 6'6". I mean, he's built like a 4'3" defensive end, and yet he still takes on double teams inside like a 3'4" nose tackle. When he gets low and digs in, you straight up cannot move him. He's incredibly powerful, and leaving him one-on-one against the run is basically begging him to ruin your day. Even a legit NFL center prospect like Michigan's Mason Cole was pretty much helpless against him the whole game, and McDowell wasn't even playing his hardest in my opinion. Wisconsin had no answer for him, Indiana had no answer, Notre Dame, who had arguably the most talented offensive line in the country, could not get any movement against him at all. The only times he ever had any problems anchoring against the run, and again, this was a rarity, I want to emphasize that, was when he popped up early after an engagement and lost leverage. Losing that leverage off the snap against shorter offensive linemen does tend to happen to guys that are his height, but the fact that I only charted a handful of instances where he lost leverage across several complete games tells you how disciplined he was about keeping his pad level low and not giving an inch against the run. Stout is an understatement with him, and that is why, despite his rather slender, lanky build compared to what is traditional for the nose tackle position, Michigan State played him at that one technique on most of his snaps. You're used to seeing shorter, squatty guys who weigh 330 pounds or more play nose tackle like Danny Shelton, not 6'6" monsters that are less than 300 pounds. That would be like having a guy with the frame of J.J. Watt play nose tackle. It just doesn't happen. But Michigan State really had nobody else on their roster that could dominate the line of scrimmage inside from that one technique, so McDowell was their guy, and boy did he excel at it. On passing downs, they took him out of the interior and put him on the edge because in addition to being by far their best run defender, he was also their only legitimate pass rusher as well. It was kind of a one-man show, to be honest, and with his other gifts, he was also very successful out on the edges. The sack numbers were not very good for a few different reasons, but trust me when I say that he definitely showed the raw physical tools to be a full-time edge rusher in the NFL. His first step was excellent for a guy his size. I mean, he can really move. It wasn't as fast as Myles Garrett or Carl Lawson or Tim Williams, of course, but none of those three guys are 280 or 285 pounds either. And yes, I will take this time to say that there is no way in this universe that Michigan State's listing of McDowell at 275 was accurate. Absolutely no way. I'd be willing to bet he was 10 pounds heavier than that just by looking at how thick he is. So theoretically speaking, if McDowell did drop about 10 pounds for the combine and get himself into the real 275 range that he's listed at, he should test really well in the broad jumps and vert jumps, at least for somebody his size, that is. However, despite that undeniable physical ability, McDowell's biggest problem as an edge rusher was finding a way to put all that athleticism to use. Considering he lined up as everything from a nose tackle to a 7-technique defensive end, it seemed to me like putting on all these different hats and taking on all these different roles kind of stunted his development in both positions. In particular, as a pass rusher, he's got literally two moves. One move is an edge rusher, one move is an interior rusher, and that's it. He hasn't grown beyond that yet, and I think that's partly because he just played too many positions at once. On the edges, his one move that he throws with any sort of consistency is the swipe move. He's just squaring up on the tackle, and while sidestepping to the edge, he swipes the tackle's hands away, clubs down again with his offhand to make sure he's clearing himself of any counter punches, and then as he's clubbing down with that inside hand, he's dipping and getting the corner. Eventually, tackles started to catch on to that though, and they anticipated the swipe combo. They started either pulling back their hands before he could neutralize them, or they started opening their hips early to turn and push him around the back of the pocket because they knew that no matter what, he was going to be sidestepping to the edge on the same depth every single play. He wasn't going to be throwing any inside counter moves at all, and they could reliably sell out against this one move. The only way to really resist against that tackle just washing you out behind the pocket is to really dig in on a rip move and not give any ground on that corner. But McDowell wasn't dipping and he wasn't ripping. He was just sidestepping out to the edge with his pad level way too high and making himself a big damn target. And the only time when he got really low, dipped around the edge, and didn't allow himself to concede any ground, surprise, surprise, he managed to get to the quarterback. He really needs to develop a proper dip and rip, because with his length and get off, even if it's not a world-beating first step like Garrett, it's still plenty good enough. And with those tools, if he combined them with technique and proper counter moves, he could be one hell of an edge rusher. As an interior rusher, he had the same problem. He only used one move consistently, which was the right-handed club swim combo. Almost every time, like clockwork, he would drift to the left a little bit like he's gonna slant, then he would wait for the lineman to engage, almost like he's kind of baiting out their hands, and then he would club them away with his right hand while swimming past them with his left. He would knife right over that left hip of whoever was supposed to block him, and while a very effective move, he used it over and over and over again to the point of being beyond predictable. By the time he got to week 5 against Indiana, the center saw it coming a mile away and just pulled his hands, watched the club pass right on by, then caught McDowell in the chest during his swim move and neutralized him pretty easily. Again, it's a great combo and he can be extremely effective with it as he showed throughout the season, but no move is immune to counters, and if you've got nothing else in your arsenal, your ceiling as a pass rusher is severely limited. I cannot stress enough how important it is for his future defensive line coach to prioritize expanding his repertoire of pass rush moves and getting him out of the habit of relying on just that one combo all game long. I mean, I've seen him get into the backfield with a one-arm bull rush. I've seen him do it, so I know he's got it in there somewhere in his body. That's what I want to see more of from him in the NFL. I just want some variety between power and finesse. That's all. Anyway, bad technique or not, McDowell was basically the only guy on Michigan State's defense that could consistently get into the backfield and do anything on a down-in, down-out basis. I could not even count how many snaps I charted where McDowell was the one Spartan holding the line of scrimmage while the rest of the front seven was basically getting blown off the ball. There was a zone run against Indiana where he destroyed the center and forced an early cutback from the ball carrier, which is what you're supposed to do against a zone run, only for that cutback lane to be left wide open because everyone else on the defense got cut down on the backside. He was setting up the pins, but nobody was there to knock him down. On the very next drive, he was pushing a double team a full yard into the backfield by himself, while the defensive end next to him got blown off the line of scrimmage by a tight end. A tight end! When I was saying earlier that the Michigan State defense was a one-man show, I wasn't joking. McDowell was their only reliable defensive player. He drew 3 penalties against the Indiana offensive line in the first 15 minutes of the game, and that was while making a ton of tackles through constant double teams. If he wasn't on that defense, they would have gotten blown out in the first quarter. I haven't seen someone put their stamp on a game like that despite facing so much adversity since Khalil Mack and Jadeveon Clowney 4 years ago. Neither of those guys had much, if any, help on their respective defenses, especially at Buffalo, and yet they still put in work week after week after week. That was Malik McDowell's cross to bear in 2016, unfortunately. I'll tell you what though, I kind of like seeing that. I like that he could still produce and disrupt offenses despite the entire game plan revolving around him every single Saturday. If he could do that with no help, I can only imagine what he could do in the NFL when he finally does get some backup. Just look at where Mack and Clowney are now for reference. Those one-man show kind of players tend to flourish at the next level when they can finally rely on teammates to pick up some slack along the way. Now, here's where my locker room comments from before come in. I think the fact that he was Michigan State's only good defensive player kind of wore him down as the year went on. I think the fact that the team in general wasn't very good kind of got to him. He was used to being a playoff contender. He was used to being part of an elite program. And all of a sudden they have a bad year once Connor Cook went to the NFL, and as the season went on, I saw the effort level taper off a bit. You look at early season games against Notre Dame and Wisconsin, and he's all fire and brimstone on every single snap. Just absolutely murdering people, chasing the ball relentlessly. And then you get to the Michigan game late in the year when they're already way out of it, and the motor ran really hot and cold. There was a rushing TD late in the second quarter where he was just slowly walking behind the play as it passed him by. Not jogging, not at least trying to get into a pile late to strip the ball, just walking. Now, I knew the ball was going to get in the end zone no matter what he did. He knew the ball was going to get in the end zone no matter what he did. That's not the point though. Even if you know the ball is going in, regardless of whether you chase or not, you still chase. You still run. You still try to follow the play. you still always at least pretend like you give a shit. Because the second you, as the best player on your team, stop trying, that's the moment the rest of the team gives up too. That's the moment when you really lose the ball game. And I think he needs to understand that. McDowell needs to be in a strong locker room that can really hammer this point home with him. Keep him motivated, keep his spirits high, and have him firing on all cylinders. Because I'll tell you this much, when he's motivated and in hunt mode, there is not an offensive lineman in the nation that could stop him. He's too gifted. It was the same thing with Clowney a few years back. There were some questions about his conditioning and effort level on the field, which were all very valid. But everyone saw what he could do when he really pinned his ears back and got after it with urgency. He was unblockable. Completely unblockable. Now in the pros, he's in a strong locker room in Houston with great leadership and coaching. Clowney's taken on part of a leadership role himself, and there's not been one single issue with his motor from the day he first arrived. I think the same thing would happen for McDowell if he were to end up in a strong locker room like, say, Carolina in the top 10 picks. That would be a great environment for him. To wrap this up, McDowell may have played nose tackle and part-time edge rusher in college, but to me his ideal fits in the NFL are either as a 4-3 flex end like you see with Michael Bennett in Seattle, or possibly as a 5 technique defensive end in a 3-4. If he was playing that flex end spot, just line him up on the strong side of the formation, let him use all that length and power to crush the edge against the run, and then when that sets up third and long situations, he's got enough burst to eventually be a great pass rusher as well. The technical development isn't there yet, so you should not expect double-digit sacks as a rookie like Joey Bosa last year, but I think any D-line coach worth his salt could have him making noticeable improvements by the end of his first season, and by year 2 or 3, I think he could be seen as a perennial Pro Bowl type of talent, just like the career arc of, and I'll say his name one more time, Jadeveon Clowney. If he reaches his full potential as a 4-3 end, we're looking at probably an even better version of Carlos Dunlap here. He'd be a perennial Pro Bowler, like I said, maybe pick up an All-Pro nod here and there, but again, it all comes down to locker room and who his coaches are. He needs that veteran presence to mentor him and keep him hungry. He needs the coaches to actually teach him how to use his hands as a pass rusher. And if he gets both of those things, I think he'll be an elite defensive end in the NFL. I'm an optimist though, so I'll say this. If McDowell lands in Carolina, and at this point I think that's a pretty decent bet, he makes the Pro Bowl by the end of his second season. They've got great veteran leadership, great coaches, and it's the perfect environment for him to become the player that I think he can be. I really hope he ends up as a Panther because it's a match made in heaven, both for the team and for McDowell, and I really do want him to be as successful as possible. Alright, anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. I've got one more coming this week, and I'm switching from breaking down one prospect to breaking down 2 of them going against each other. It's stud on stud, first rounder on first rounder with Alabama left tackle Cam Robinson versus Texas A&M edge rusher Myles Garrett. These guys have battled a lot against one another during their college careers, and seeing them go at it once again in 2016 was one of my favorite individual battles of the season. I'll have that for you on Thursday, so again, look out for that one. Thank you so much for watching. I'll be back with more in a couple days. So until then, later.